Now it is day 2 of the Russian invasion into Ukraine, and its forces continue to press deep into Ukraine. The battle has reached the outskirts of Ukraine's capital, Kiev. In a midnight address, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country was left alone to fight Russia after the Kremlin launched a full-scale invasion. He also warned that Russian sabotage groups had entered the capital, urged residents to be vigilant and observe curfew rules.
Але є й друге. Ми залишаємось наодинці у захисті нашої держави. Хто готовий воювати разом з нами? Чесно, не бачу таких. Хто готовий дати Україні гарантію вступу до НАТО? Чесно, всі бояться.
Across Ukraine, at least 137 people have been killed in the first day of fighting. President Zelensky called up conscripts, reservists countrywide to come and fight as he ordered general mobilization. Till now, over 100,000 people have been displaced as Russian missiles and shelling rained down on Ukrainian cities. The first Ukraine refugees have already begun trickling into Hungary and Romania. And for more perspective on this, we're now being joined by Lester Munson, Senior Fellow at the National Security Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. Russia has seized control of the Chernobyl nuclear plant. What can you tell us of the significance of this?
Well, it's an incredibly dangerous thing if you think about it. There is still radioactive waste at Chernobyl being protected by a giant shield. If the fighting had done anything to disrupt that shield, we could have seen catastrophic consequences for Ukraine, for Russia, for other neighboring countries. So it's a very somber reminder that very much is at stake during this Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Right. Now, we also spoke to some experts yesterday to understand the situation. Now, some believe that sanctions from the United States and the West are not bound to have a very tragic impact on Russia. What do you make of this?
I think that's correct. These sanctions that you've been discussing so far on the show are important. They should be done. And it's critical that the West show Russian leadership that it's willing to take this action. But at the end of the day, none of this will deter Vladimir Putin from doing what he wants to do in Ukraine. In order to get to that place, we would have to contemplate the cutoff of Russian energy supplies to Europe. And that means supplying Europe with energy sources from elsewhere, probably from the United States, perhaps other places. And so far, we haven't seen Europeans or the Americans willing to do that.
Right. Also, just for more clarity, if not sanctions, then what other steps can the United States and the Western allies take to deter Russia and aid Ukraine?
Well, the United States and its allies can be doing as much as it can to help those Ukrainians who are actually fighting the Russians by providing them with weapons and other assistance as appropriate, so that Russia bears a huge cost for its terrible mistake in invading Ukraine.
Right. Also, Russian troops are inching closer to Kiev. What do you think is the way forward here?
Well, Russian troops are no doubt looking for President Zelensky. They want to replace him with someone who will be a Russian puppet. He appears to be, at least on occasion, out on the front lines. So this is going to be a very interesting cat and mouse game that's going on inside Ukraine. We'll see how long it lasts.
Right. And also, would you say Russia's ambitions are limited to just Ukraine?
Well, President Biden said today that he thinks Vladimir Putin is looking beyond just Ukraine. That should be of great concern to Europeans. There are NATO countries right on the border of Russia, Poland, the Baltic states, just to name 4. So if this conflict does metastasize into other areas, it immediately would trigger possible NATO action. The United States and other NATO allies would be compelled to come to the aid of countries threatened by Russia. And in that case, we would see a much larger scale of fighting.
Right, and that in fact brings me to my next question. There are still questions over what President Putin's objectives here are. What is your assessment?
It seems fairly clear that what he wants to do is completely subjugate Ukraine to his will. And probably by decapitating, is the term used, the leadership of the country. Right now, Ukraine is a threat to Vladimir Putin, personally, because Ukraine is a country that is cousin to Russia. It is a democracy. It largely respects human rights and the rule of law. And for that example to be sitting there of a people with such close affinity to the Russians is a direct threat to Vladimir Putin's rule. So he needs to demonstrate that that's not going to work.
So would you say that it's too late for diplomacy, or is there still some hope?
It is probably too late for diplomacy, but of course, I think Zelensky and the West would be willing to talk under the right circumstances. But right now, this is about the fight for Ukraine.
All right, Mr. Lester, thank you so much for joining us with your analysis of the situation. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.